Welcome back to another reaction stream. We're looking ahead to Game Week 8 already, but Double Game Week 7 hasn't finished. We've got two more games, Chelsea versus Fulham tomorrow, and on Tuesday, we've got Burnley versus Luton Town to complete that Double Game Week for both respective sides. Fair play to those of you with the likes of Ollie Watkins, Carlton Morris, amongst a few others like Heung-min Son, who did very well this week, Musa Diaby. The list is endless. I've had yet another disastrous week, and if you were tuning in to the deadline stream, which unfortunately started late because my broadband was down and I had to use basically my hotspot and all of that jazz. Well, I made a late move of Chilwell to Sven Botman for a -4 hit. Botman is out for a month, it looks like, and Estupinian's -2 points is going to come on anyway. So I basically spent -4 to lose another -2. So it's been a disastrous week for me. The only shining lights is the transfer of Kieran Trippier, who got a 12-pointer. Apart from that, Bukayo Saka getting a goal, but really it was just disastrous. Even Alvarez, who scored a great free kick, that transfer from Watkins to Alvarez last week was one of the worst transfers I've probably ever made, and I'm looking to bring Ollie Watkins back in, but I'll talk more about that as the week progresses. Let's get straight into your questions, your team situations. If you are doing poorly, just like myself, maybe you're doing even worse, don't worry, there's a long way to go, and it's only 7 game weeks in, but of course, there are some troubling signs, and we need to bounce back very soon, and I'm still fairly confident with the wildcard in my back pocket that I can do so, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It has been a dreadful start to the season. Good game week 1, I was around 202k, but I've just been getting red arrows ever since game week 3, I think, so I need to rectify things and change my squad, and that's where the wildcard will come into play. There's also more UCL fantasy content coming along, so I uploaded a chip strategy on Thursday, I think it was. I also did the best limitless team on Friday, and the best wildcard team was released earlier today. Unfortunately, as it tends to be the case with UCL fantasy and FPL, things become out of date very quickly, so there were a few injury updates that happened a few hours after I recorded the videos, which was a bit of a shame, and I addressed all of that in the comment section there, and I'll continue to address them in the team selection video and the deadline stream on Tuesday. And our aim is to get to 21,000 subscribers by that deadline stream for UCL Fantasy ahead of match day 2. So that'll be around 3:30 p.m. UK time. You'll see it once I set it up, probably tomorrow. So there's plenty of content headed your way, and it's going to be very popular this week for FPL, the best wildcard team for Game Week 8. I'm going to put a lot of research into that, show you a few different drafts potentially, one with Salah, one without, and show you some of the best ways to bounce back and have a very good, maybe not end to the season, there's still a long way to go, but at least have a good middle period now from Game Week 7 all the way until Christmas. Let's get straight into your questions as always. Hopefully no hiccups with, you know what, the broadband and all of that. Welcome, Sean. Good to see you, and thank you for being first. Obviously, all of you are appreciated. Twister Parky says, really should be doing some work. Just watched FPL videos all day. Yeah, I can see what you mean. Many years ago, I probably would have done the same thing, you know, watched a few FPL videos. But yeah, just do your work, I'd say. You can always go back to the stream later on. Patrick says, hi Dylan, yet another red arrow for me with 47 points of Kabori to go. Would you go the route with Salah in or Watkins and Trippier in? No wildcard left, so can't get all three in. That's a great question, and I understand your dilemma. I'm having a similar one on the wildcard, and ultimately, I think Salah is just so consistent, and he is worth the money, but it can also result in other areas of your team being slightly worse off than you'd want. And as for Watkins and Trippier, that is a very good duo with the fixtures in mind, especially for Aston Villa, who are top of the FDR, as we'll get on to very soon, and also in the deadline stream next Saturday, I think it is. So I'd probably go for Watkins and Trippier at the moment, but Salah is still a great option, and either way, you're getting a good asset in, and you should see an improvement from a situation. 47 points of Kabori is disappointing, but maybe you can get into the 50-point mark, and then next week with your transfers, you can definitely bounce back. Neil says, -1 from 5 defenders, 40 points of Morris and Bayer to come. That is very frustrating, but I have to say Morris and Bayer should get you something. I think Morris is more likely, so still a bit of hope left there for you, Neil. Hopefully you can have a good end to Game Week 7. And once again, in Game Week 8, there's a great chance to bounce back, especially with the fixture swings happening in Game Week 9, Game Week 10, even in Game Week 8 with Spurs, for example. Same says 72 points, big week thanks to Odegaard, White and Trippier, and now looking to wildcard Game Week 8. That's a good position to be in. I wish I was in that position. Unfortunately, I'm not, but really good they had those three. Ben White scoring the 4th goal. 2 of his 3 Premier League goals have come against Bournemouth. As for Odegaard, he's also done really well against Bournemouth historically. I think last season he scored a brace at the Vitality Stadium. As for Trippier, he's just doing Trippier things nowadays after a pretty shaky start, you have to say. So good stuff. use a wildcard or not with 2 free transfers is the main question. Well, 2 free transfers isn't too bad, of course. The thing is, it's impossible for me to say yes or no without knowing your team. I think the way I'd summarize it is, if you don't have Aston Villa players, if you don't have those from Tottenham, or maybe you only have one, and you also don't have Liverpool coverage, for example, like a Mohamed Salah, and you're missing maybe 3 or 4 key assets that you think can really propel you up the ranks, then I'd consider using the wild card. But if you can cover most of your issues with the 2 free transfers or even a -4 hit, then you could save the wild card for a little bit longer. But your situation might be different to mine and many others watching as well. Weising says 79 points all out. From 2.8 million rank to 750k, that's good. Obviously, Weising, I always see you sometimes in the Discord server saying, oh, I'm having a shocker, but I see you always getting the green arrows, so it's looking good for you. And I think there's plenty more opportunities to keep on going up the ranks. That's a big rank rise. I'm looking for something similar next week. God knows I need it. 47 says John Darren. Yeah, look on the bright side. Look at the amount of points I've got, my rank. There's always going to be someone worse off than you, but of course, it's not ideal. It's not really too much of a comfort, but there's still a long way to go. I'd say calma. Dawn says, what move do I make? Oh, sorry, I just lost your question. Let me just go all the way back up. But I do recognize I'm very far behind in the chat, so I might have to make a few moves. So yeah, Dawn says, what move do I make? I have 2 free transfers and 0 million in the bank. I have Areola, Flecken, Udogi, Botman, Estupinian, Cher, Cash, Madison, and Mbumo, Diaby, Salah, Saka, Haaland, Alvarez, Archer. I think your team looks pretty solid, to be fair. I think the moves I would make... Well, Botman is out for up to a month, but when I say that, we have an international break very soon. So he will miss the next Premier League game, but he's not going to miss, let's say, 3 or 4 Premier League games unless something happens. But I think Botman is definitely someone to sell, and I'd also say Mbumo. The rest are really good assets, even Alvarez, so I would keep them. So I think Botman and Mbumo to sell. But 0 million in the bank might make it a bit tough. Now, this might sound completely preposterous, but with Botman injured, as a short-term punt, you can go for Lascelles, but that's not going to be a long-term thing. So if you want someone kind of nailed on for the next 5 to 10 game weeks at the very least, then I would look elsewhere. But Botman to Lascelles isn't a bad short-term punt. And as for Mbumo, I think I'd go to Bowen. The only issue with that is that he faces Newcastle next, then it's Aston Villa, I believe, but the long-term fixtures for West Ham are very good. So I think those 2 transfers could be very good for you. Best midfield differentials, Dylan? Well, I'm going to talk about some quite low-owned players, but I'll be quite honest, a lot of the options with 5% ownership or below, the real differentials, they're not the best options, and that's why the ownership is so low. But I think Bowen at 14.9% ownership, maybe not the biggest differential, but that could still get you some really big rank rises over the next few weeks. I'd also point towards Diaby if he's cleared from his knock that he picked up against Brighton. I'd also look at Diaz still. I like him, but it would be Salah, Darwin, then Diaz in the Liverpool pecking order. In terms of other midfielders, Gordon, once he comes back from suspension in Game Week 9, I think he's probably at the top of my list, and his ownership is around 7.5% at the moment. I know Almiron scored a great goal yesterday, but I don't think I'd go for him, and Gordon would be my preference in the Newcastle midfield. Martinelli, when he's back, is a fantastic option, but I'm not sure when that's going to be. Maybe Man City, but if not, he should be available after the next international break, so for Game Week 9 against Chelsea away. So I think Martinelli is definitely someone to keep an eye on. His ownership is now 4.5%, so I think that could be fantastic. In terms of other differentials, though, Doku could be pretty decent. Leandro Trossard when he's available, which could be Man City once again. But really, in terms of differentials, I would just look at Martinelli when he's back, Gordon when he's back, and then some of these 10%, 15% owned players like Jarrod Bowen. Even Ward-Prowse, so I think, yeah, he's at 13.5% as well. He's still a really good option despite blanking again. That's 2 blanks in a row, which is quite surprising. But yeah, Ward-Prowse is still a very good option as well. Dara says, which option is the best to go for? 1, Saka, Foden and Botman. 2, Son, Diaby and Cash -4. 2, Trippier, Mbumo and Foden to Cash, Diaby and Son. Or 3, Saka, Foden to Son and Diaby. So the first 2 options are -4 hits. The third one is just 2 free transfers. Good question. My preference is probably the third option if Diaby is clear. But it all depends on which player you start with Botman missing out. So if it means you start Estupinian at home to Liverpool, then I would consider one of the -4 hits. So let me know, Dara, and I can give you a conclusive answer. But if you've got a decent player to stand in for Sven Botman, then I would go for 2 free transfers and bring in Son and Diaby. You definitely say my game week almost benching Watkins for Mbeumo. I wouldn't say that. Once again, I always give my opinion. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but I say it both ways. I don't want to be held accountable for decisions people make, and I also don't want to take credit if you decide to follow advice or, you know, engage in a conversation which leads to that. But I appreciate the kind words. The thing is with Watkins, he has a good record against Brighton, which I did underestimate a little bit, but I don't think anyone expected that 6-1 drubbing and for Watkins to get 4 attacking returns. Mbeumo was very disappointing considering that Nottingham Forest went down to 10 men today, but that's football sometimes. Rice says 34, how much worse could it get? Well, yeah, it seems like the lowest of the low, but I've been saying that every single week in the past 4 or 5 weeks, and it still manages to get worse, but honestly, there's still a long way to go, and I'm still fairly optimistic. If you've got the wildcard in your back pocket and, you know, you might be using it this week, that is a really good opportunity for you to start gaining ground and making up for the poor start to the season. Thoughts on Botman moving forward? Well, like I said, he's probably missing out for 1 month, but that could be just one Premier League game. So it's not too bad. He's not the biggest priority sell, I would argue, but let's keep an update. Let's keep an eye out for updates by Eddie Howe and see how that all develops. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've basically pushed the wildcard button. I'll talk more about this in the team selection video and the wildcard as well. But yeah, I think Botman, what you could do with him is go to Burn from right now. But then again, he is facing West Ham next, and that's not the best fixture. So there is a case for just benching him, starting someone else. But if it is a Stupinian against Liverpool and Man City, then in those sorts of scenarios, I would look to sell him. So it all depends on your team situation. Welcome to Stupaki, good to see you. Diogo says 63 points, that's good. With Kabori still to play, Anderson 15 points off the bench, that's really good, man. I literally took a -4 for Botman, and Estepinian came on, or is going to come on for me for a -2. So you know, I'd much rather have those Anderson 15 points, so really good stuff. 46 says Steelix. Jerome says, how do we know that Botman is out for that long? Well, then again, it is according to reports, and one of the reasons why I bought him in the deadline stream is because a lot of these leaks, so to speak, they said that Botman was going to start, and I thought he was going to start anyway. That was my prediction, and now the rumour is that he's going to be out for up to a month. He's definitely a concern for the PSG game this week, and also the next Premier League game against West Ham, so that could be a massive blow, but it shouldn't be a long-term injury anyway. Remember, we do have an international break coming up very soon. Twister Parky says 61 points for me this week and 83 for my second team. Yeah, in terms of second teams and all that, I've only done it in F1 Fantasy, and it's really frustrating in a way when your second or third team does better than your main team, but there you go. 61 points isn't too bad this week. Yeah, John Darren, potentially. I think Wolves could provide a stern test. If I'm not mistaken, it's a bit of a local rivalry there in the Midlands, and it wouldn't surprise me if Wolves got a result. It really wouldn't, especially off the back of that huge result against Man City. But Watkins is just a really good long-term option with those fixtures. I probably was too impatient with him, so I did make a mistake there. But with the form Alvarez was in, you know, I just wanted to take that punt, and it hasn't turned out right. Yeah, I think a lot of us did, but it's very frustrating because I've been advocating for Watkins since Game Week 1. I had him, you know, in so many of these transfer tips videos, I kept talking about holding him in Game Weeks 3, 4, 5, you know, pretty much every single Game Week. But in the end, I pulled the trigger. And I think one of my biggest mistakes this season is making too many, maybe reactionary transfers, but also, you know, kind of just looking at what happened last week and maybe, you know, having that influence my decisions a bit too much. That's probably something I rarely do, but I've been doing it a lot this season, so it is frustrating. And Watkins has only blanked once this season, but the fact he didn't score until Game Week 6 is very frustrating, I can't lie to you. Sell Saka, Sterling, or Mbeumo to Son? Well, from those three, I think Saka, despite facing C, is the one to keep. I really do. So for me, it'd be Sterling. It's Sterling or Mbeumo. I think with Mbeumo facing Man United, I know United are looking terrible at the moment, but I think with Sterling facing Burnley as well, I'd sell Mbeumo this week to Son, and then in the following week, when Sterling faces Arsenal, I think that's after the international break, that's when I would sell Sterling too. But this week, I'd sell Mbeumo. You still have Sterling, Dylan? Well, not anymore because I did play the wild card, and he'll probably score, by the way. I'm really convinced he's going to do well against Burnley, but still long term, I'm quite happy to sell him. So yeah, let's wait and see. Hopefully he can do something against Fulham tomorrow, you know, something to salvage my rank a little bit, but yeah, he's not in my team anymore long term. I did the same Watkins move. Yeah, it's a really popular one that a lot of us did. Look, Alvarez long term is still potentially a better option. When I say long term, I'm talking about until the end of the season. But for the next 5 to 10 game weeks with the fixtures in mind, Watkins is the clear winner, unfortunately. And look, Alvarez is fixture-proof. He can still do really well, but it's really hard to back against Watkins at the moment. And he's only blanked once, which also boosts his appeal. I think I'm not selling in Mbumo. Fixtures are fine. Yeah, I like the Burnley fixture in Game Week 9, but I'm still quite open to selling, especially when you have Jared Bowen, James Ward-Prowse. You've got Mitoma around Game Week 10 with good fixtures. Bukayo Saka, Heung-min Son, Maddison, Salah. There's so many different midfielder options, and I think they are better than Mbumo right now. But he's not a bad option still. 48k to 2.2 million. Yeah, I also was around 200k in Game Week 1, and I'm now 3.2 million. I don't think I've ever been in this sort of rank, especially since I've started making videos, that's for sure. But it's only 7 game weeks. I know, obviously, ideally you'd have a good start and then build upon those foundations, but these things happen, and sometimes you have a really poor start, and it's about how you react. So I wouldn't be too concerned, of course. It is frustrating, but you still have a lot of opportunities to make up that ground. Jam Toaster says, who would you sell out of these 4? Saka, Mbumo, Foden, Bruno. Foden has the worst fixtures, but I still like him. I think from those 4, it probably is Mbumo, who, once again, is still a good option, but he would be the priority sell for me from those 4. Bruno is more expensive, so you can make a case for him. Saka is the best option, period. Despite facing Man City and Chelsea in the next 2, Saka can still do well. I think he scored in both fixtures last season. Actually, I don't think he scored in the Chelsea one, but I think he got an assist. So, yeah, I'd keep Saka for sure, and I'd probably sell Mbumo. I have the wildcard active, so do I, and I'm not going to talk too much about wildcard teams and stuff. I'm going to leave that for the best wildcard team video later this week, and my team selection, where there could be a few updates as well. Arthur says, hi Dylan, got 18 points, 2 own goals. Wait, 18 points overall? There's no way that's the case, but 2 own goals, that's just really bad luck, and look, these things happen, and FPL, sometimes the luck seems to be on your side, and sometimes it seems like everything's against you, but I think the luck will balance out a little bit over the coming weeks. Evening, folks. Bad week for most. Already activated wildcard and skipped a few price hikes, which is a small positive. Same here. Not Salah. I'd love to bring him in, but I'm trying to find that balance in my wildcard squad, and it's very difficult to achieve that with the Egyptian kin. But hopefully I can do it. Hopefully I can. I think Salah is just one of the best options. And one thing I am considering, at least for the next 2 or 3 game weeks, is to go without Haaland, have Salah, and then make those 2 free transfers and bring Haaland back in ahead of Game Week 11 against Bournemouth. That's something I am considering, and I'll try to develop upon this topic in future videos too. I did Bruno to Son for Game Week 9. Yeah, I think that's fairly standard. Bruno's still a good option, but Son playing down the middle, facing Luton Town away, and then Fulham at home, it doesn't get much better than that. Welcome, Toronto. Good evening, Dylan. What on earth is going on with Brentford? That's a great question. You know, facing 10 men against Nottingham Forest, they take the lead, you know, a few minutes after the red card, and then they concede. I don't know how many games that is now that they've lost. So they drew this game, and I think they lost the previous 3 against Everton, Arsenal in the Carabao, and also Newcastle. Look, they're still a decent team, but they are missing some key players here. And of course, they sold their best goalkeeper in the summer, or they loaned him. So it is a bit tricky, but I still think Brentford will be fine. They might be a bit close to the relegation battle, but I think their quality will still prevail. They've got a good manager, but yeah, it is very frustrating and very worrying, and even the likes of Mbumo don't look that appealing right now. Is it wildcard time? You know, whenever I get asked these questions, I hate to say it, but it's ultimately team dependent. I think for a lot of people watching, it might be the time to wildcard. I've activated it myself. I think it's about time. When I was asked yesterday, when are you looking to wildcard? I said potentially in Game Week 8 or 9, but it's not locked in, and a lot depends on injuries and what happens in Game Week 7. And you know, pretty much from everything that happened yesterday, those 8 matches, I decided to pull the trigger. So that's the way it goes, and I'm not really sure about your team situation, so I can't say. If you wildcard, you cancel out previous hits already taken. The way it works with the hits, and I've described this before, is if you take hits ahead of the next game week. So let's say, for example, we made 2 or 3 free transfers, 2 or 3 transfers, should I say, and you take a -4 hit heading into Game Week 8. If you then play the wild card, that will cancel every single hit you've taken ahead of Game Week 8, but it doesn't cancel all the hits you've taken before in previous game weeks, which obviously I'm guessing you know, but just in case, based on the phrasing of the question, that's the way it works. Wasing says, what to do with Steele, Turner, Gavardio, Estupinian, Mitoma, Gusto, Diaby, maybe Alvarez. I wouldn't be too concerned about most of them. Estupinian is still a good long-term hold. Obviously, the next 2 game weeks I'd bench him, but really good option from game weeks 10 onwards. Same with Mitoma. As for Gusto, he's a sell. Gavardio, not really too keen on him with the fixture run and possible rotation here and there. So As for Diaby as well, he picked up a knock. I think he's a hold, especially for the time being. And as for Alvarez, still a really good option. But if you can find a way to go to Watkins, it's not a bad move, especially with fixtures in mind. But for me, Diaby, Alvarez, Estupiñán are holds. Gusto, Gavardio are probably sells. And as for Turner, he's a decent budget goalkeeper for the time being. He was very shaky today, though. And as for Steele, he's a sell. Best wildcard picks, I'll talk about this in the best wildcard team video, of course. But you can imagine some of my suggestions like Heung-min Son, Salah, Saka, Trippier, even Lascelles as a short-term punt, Erling Haaland, kind of the typical names, Ollie Watkins or Alvarez. I'd have one of those two. So those are some names for you. Milner says it's not looking good. There's still a long way to go, trust me. I'm just going to go through all the questions from members and stuff like that before catching up to the stream. Just to Parky says, I meant Sterling for tomorrow. He might save you. I don't think so. All he can do really is minimize the red arrow. If he gets like a goal or something, that'd be good. I'd be very happy with that. But not really expecting much, especially on Tuesday. I think Morris has a good chance of returning, and that could also put my rank down a little bit as well. Watkins, Alvarez, and Haaland opt for the wild card. Yeah, if you're looking for a front three, that looks like the best on paper. But there's still 5 really good midfielders to have at the very least in your squad. So it's all about striking that balance. What to do with Bruno? I still like him, and he's a good option on the wild card still, but I'm just not convinced by Man United. There are some occasions where they don't look like scoring. He had a really good shot, which got saved by Johnston, but I think there are better alternatives like Saka, Heung-min Son, Maddison, and that's where I'd probably say I'd sell him, but he's not a priority sell in my opinion. If he's your only Man United coverage, I think he's probably the best option they have to offer. Mohammed says, I have Share and Botman. Shall I get Trippier instead of Botman? I probably would, but bear in mind a few things. 1, Botman probably won't be out for too long. And 2, getting Trippier might mean you can't get Son or Salah in the midfield. And that's something you might want ahead of game week 8 or 9. So be very careful about those 2 things. But ultimately, if you can do that transfer and you're happy with your team, I would do it. FPL Clyde says, wildcarded game week 7, 70 points with Trippier as captain. Nice, really good stuff. I saw a few people ask me, should I captain Trippier? And really fair play to those of you that went for it. I thought Haaland would score 1 or 2 at the very least against Wolves. I completely misread the game, and maybe that Rodri suspension is bigger than I thought. Maybe it is, but I'm expecting Man City to bounce back against Arsenal, against Leipzig midweek. So look, let's not underestimate Man City still, but Trippier captain, really good stuff. Alvarez to Watkins, a good move. I think so, and obviously it pains me to say it since I made that exact same move, but the opposite way 2 weeks ago. But I think it is. With fixtures in mind and Ollie Watkins' form, it's very difficult to ignore him. The only downside to Watkins is that he's not on penalties, and Alvarez is still a really good option, by the way. Let's not forget, he still scored at the weekend, but that got dwarfed by Watkins' performance. But yeah, I think it is a good move. Get Matoma now for Mbeumo or wait 2 weeks? I'd wait 2 weeks for sure. Not 100% FPL, but what were your thoughts on the Liverpool VAR drama? That was messed up. It's not the first time, though. I think a lot of teams have experienced this sort of thing. It's just the fact there was such a big match, a lot of hype going into it. I'm not sure about similar level teams, but they're both in a similar level or similar position in the table. And it ultimately swung things Spurs' way, if we're being completely honest. And some of these decisions aren't forgivable. They're literally basic. Anyone watching in real time would have seen that's offside. And to have VAR and then to use all these excuses they've been using to justify that hiccup, it's just disgraceful, to be honest. But it's happened to many teams before. Even against Brentford, Arsenal-Brentford, they forgot to draw the lines. There's going to be many more examples this season. Wolves against Man United, they didn't give a penalty. There's so many cases of big decisions that are so obvious not being given, even with VAR. What do you think about Man United and Chelsea players until now? Well, with Man United, I still like Bruno Fernandes. I maintain that. When he does get that occasional goal or assist, he's very good for the bonus points, and I think we'll get a decent number of attacking returns this season. Rashford doesn't look anywhere near his best. I know there were certain games like Arsenal where he looked very dangerous every time he got on the ball, but 1 goal in 7 games now, he's just not worth that price. You've got Heung-min Son playing down the middle in a better team at the moment. I'd rather go that way, but yeah, in terms of Man United, I think the only option is Bruno Fernandes. And as for Chelsea, I'd steer very clear. You could argue that a cheap option like Colwill is decent, but I would just completely avoid for now. especially with their fixture run coming up very soon after Burnley away, which is absolutely awful. If you do have Chelsea players and you're not using the wild card, I'd probably hold for one more week in Game Week 8 against Burnley, and then after that, I'd sell all of them. Sungesso says, hi Dylan, sell Foden or Saka for Maddison? I'd sell Foden. He might do better in the matchup of Arsenal-Man City, but long-term, I think Saka's a better option. 3.9 for Burnley's Taylor. He was only a good pick for me in the double game week. He could do well against Luton Town now on Tuesday, but he's not someone I'd look to go for in the long term. He might be a decent enabler, of course, on a wild card. That's not too bad, but I'd rather go for Lascelles as a short-term punt whilst Botman is injured. Also, Neto. I was probably completely wrong about him, to be fair, but you know, a lot of times I look at past data or past seasons, and Neto, whilst I've always rated him as a player, I never rated him as an FPL asset. But this season, he's been so consistent, and the returns don't look like stopping. They face Aston Villa next, but Neto can do well in that fixture. Why not? So, yeah, I think Pedro Neto is definitely worth consideration and one of the best options at that price and below. But, of course, I'd still be a bit worried in the back of my mind. You know, I'm still expecting a drop-off, and Wolves aren't the most reliable team offensively. You know, against Man City, I have to say they were very fortunate with refereeing decisions and also in terms of the general play, where I think Man City still deserve to win. But that's football, that's the Premier League, and Neto is a good option right now. Will says, dropped 1 point family and rank, want a wildcard but already own Salah. Not necessarily, because you can make a great wildcard squad without Salah, and you're still probably going to make 6+ changes, which I'm guessing you will, and that's ultimately what the wildcard comes down to. If you're making a number of changes that improve every single position, I think it's just worth playing the chip. Salah looked very good versus Spurs until they started losing players. He did, and you know, if that DS goal counted, which it should have, that would have been a Salah assist. So, you know, that run of 12 would have been 13 games of producing a return. It would have continued if the referees did their job. O'Shankly says, move away from Haaland, bring him back after 2 weeks. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I'm considering that on the wild card. I'm considering going for Salah, captaining him in game weeks 9 and 10, and then bringing Haaland back in for game week 11. I think that's a very sound strategy, to be honest. I know Haaland can still do well against Arsenal, Man United, Brighton, whoever it may be, but I still think that's a good strategy, and ultimately, Salah should outscore him in that time period. And also, when you look at it, beyond game week 11 when Salah plays Luton, I'm not saying you don't want to have Salah, but he's not as appealing as he is in that period between game weeks 9 and 11. Emma says, hi Dylan, if I transfer tonight and then wildcard later on in the week, how does it work? Well, the only thing the wildcard would do in this case is cancel out any hits you may have taken. But in terms of if you wildcard later in the week, it makes no difference whatsoever. The player you brought in already is part of your squad, you know, as soon as you make the transfer, of course. And the wildcard only makes further changes to your squad, depending on how many you make, of course. But yeah, it really has no impact, to be quite frank, unless you take a hit. And in that case, the wildcard wipes out any hits you have taken, so you don't lose any points ahead of Game Week 8. Greenia says Pickford, Turner, Udogie, Dallo, Cash, Share, Gvardiol, Maddison, Son, Saka, Bruno and Mbeumo, Watkins, Haaland, Archer. Here's a good squad. I think the biggest concern there is your goalkeeper. Turner could lose his spot soon. I've been saying this for a long time. It hasn't happened yet, but it might do after today. As for Pickford, he's just an awful FPL option. I've never liked him even from the summer. You can go back to my content there. I've been very firm on that. Your defence is good. Of course, a few concerns here and there with Gvardiol, maybe, Dallo, but ultimately, Udogie, Cash and Share, really good back three for Game Week 7. Your midfield also looks very good, even with Bruno Fernandes in there, and you've got a good front line with Watkins and Haaland. So I think he is good enough to hold off of the wild card, but I would sell Pickford if you can. Champions League wildcard or limitless, I'm guessing that is. I'll talk more about this in the team selection video tomorrow. I'm probably going to play a chip and I'll reveal what chip I'm looking to play in tomorrow's video and, of course, in the deadline stream on Tuesday. But your team situation might be different, of course, but my preference at the moment is to play the limitless in match day 2, and this is something I touched upon in the chip strategy video on Thursday. Areola is a lock in my wildcard. Yeah, I completely agree. And Leno and Johnston are the two goalkeepers I'm looking at. I'm going to compare their stats and also just compare their points tallies and more metrics before ultimately deciding. But they're two of the best options in the game right now in the goalkeeper position. And as for Areola, he's a steal at 4.2 million. Feels like Maddison are more promising than Bowen. Yeah, I still prefer Maddison over Bowen, but I'm considering both. I really am. And let's say, for example, I go with Salah and I go for a midfield 5 of Son, Maddison, etc. I can always bring Bowen in around game week 11, and that will enable me to get Haaland back in up front. So I think Bowen is really on my radar. Your wildcard active? It is. But I'm not going to show my team. Like I said, I'll save that for future videos and stuff like that. Yeah, look, Johnston, Anderson, they deserve credit. Johnston is definitely in consideration for my wildcard team. I have preferred Leno in recent weeks, but I think with Dean Henderson being injured midweek against Man United, I think that opens the door for Johnston to just keep his spot. And as for Anderson, really good option at 4.7 million, but you might not be able to afford it in some cases. So Mitchell, Gay are still fine at 4.5. United are playing as individuals, no cohesion. Even last season, to be honest, they had a really good record at Old Trafford, which bailed them out. They were very tough to beat there. Only Brian were able to do so. But this season, they're conceding so many chances at home. They look shaky. And going forwards, I've never really seen, a run of games where Man United look, just on it and they have those connections going on. Maybe the Christmas period, straight after we got back from the World Cup. Man United had a bit of a good run, beating Nottingham Forest comprehensively and a few results like that. But in general, I think United lack cohesion, as you say. James Ward-Prowse got one bonus despite blanking. That's what I mean. He's a really good FPL option. If you're looking for West Ham assets, it's Areola, Bowen, and James Ward-Prowse. They're the top three. I do prefer Bowen a little bit more, as I said in yesterday's stream, but James Ward-Prowse is really good value for money, and he might be in my final team simply for budget. I really like him. 62 points on wildcard with Morris and Kabore to come. Thoughts? Decent. You could get to 70 plus, and that would be a pretty decent score in Game Week 7. And if you have a way of getting off these Luton Town players in the weeks to come, I think you're in a good position. Bowen, solid choice for next 2-3 matches. He still is, I admit. He is a good option, but I would argue he's even better from Game Weeks 11 onwards. The fixtures aren't particularly great over the next two against Newcastle and Aston Villa, but he can still return. Milner says, did Vicario to Johnston, too many Spurs players, and Mbeumo to Son. Next game week, I'm doing Bruno to Saka to Bowen. Yeah, that's completely understandable. Son should do really well against Luton Town. And as for Bruno/Saka to Bowen, good stuff. Look, here's a close one because Bruno has better fixtures, but I'd still keep Saka. He's just so consistent this season, and so long as he's fit, because he gets so many knocks, it looks like nowadays, I think Saka is not essential, but one of the best midfielders in the game. As I said in every stream, my club and United are the two most finished clubs in the Premier League now. It's all relative because United and Chelsea have expectations, especially Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world. But yeah, look, I think there are worse situations than you, even though it doesn't feel like it. I played my triple captainship on Haaland. Yeah, I remember you said that. And look, I thought he could get something. So, it wouldn't have been the worst triple captaincy in the world. I was always a bit skeptical in terms of using it myself. I said I wouldn't have done it personally, but I'm not going to lie to you and say I expected him to blank because I didn't. That's why I captained him. I have Saka, Son, Maddison, Foden, and Mbeumo. Shall I sell Mbeumo? Look, Mbeumo is still a good option, especially in Game Week 9 against Burnley, but I think I would sell him, especially to a Bowen, James Ward-Prowse. They look like the best options of that price and below right now. Currently on a wild card and have double Palace defence in Anderson and Johnston. I mean, they've been really impressive so far this season. They've got a good fixture run coming. I'd stick to one, personally. I wouldn't double up on Palace defensively, but I think having one is definitely the right idea. In terms of which one is better, a very difficult question to answer, but I am leaning towards Johnston for his price, and really apart from him, you've got Leno and Areola, but apart from that, you have to spend more money to get a good goalkeeper. So yeah, I'd go for Johnston right now, especially if Henderson is out long term. It's possible. Let's wait and see, of course, but I think there's still quite a few United fans that back him, and ultimately, if I'm being quite objective, I don't think sacking Ten Hag necessarily solves the issues Man United have. The issues run much deeper than Ten Hag, but I am quite surprised because at Ajax, he played a really good style of football. I even wanted him at some stage as the Arsenal manager, but it just hasn't worked out so far at United. That cup win last year maybe saved them a little bit. Also, really good home record, finishing in the top 4, but they look really far off it this season. You consider taking off Mbeumo? Yes, he's already out of my team because I wildcarded. If I didn't, then maybe I would have just sold Sterling instead or something like that. But who should I take for him? Yeah, Diaby will be my overall preference. Then it's probably Bowen and James Ward-Prowse. Of course, I don't know how much budget you have for this position and which players you have already, but I think Diaby, Bowen, Ward-Prowse would be top 3 of my list. Downside, Watkins not on penalties, but then he was not very good on pens last year. Exactly that. Thoughts on Solanke for a punt? He's a decent option, to be honest. He's got a decent number of points this season. pretty impressive last season as well, but I think there are better forwards elsewhere. Like Alvarez, I still prefer Awini. You've got Ollie Watkins, of course, rising to form again. So I'd rather go there. But Solanke's not bad. There's definitely worse punts than him. We had terrible VAR decisions in Brighton Spurs. Yeah, that's true. That is really true. I forgot about that. I was on holiday when that happened. That is very true. Osin Larkin says, I still have Onana, Botman, Wilson, Saka, Foden, Akanji, and don't have the likes of Son, Doggy, Cash, Watkins, Trippier. Do I hit the button tonight to avoid being priced out? Good question. So overall, I think you probably have a very good squad, but I probably would play the wild card. I think I would in your situation. And since you asked about that, let's go and talk about some price rises that could happen tonight. So using this site, fplstatistics.co.uk, Cash and Trippier could go up. A lot of price changes happened yesterday, and I wouldn't expect much transfer activity tonight. At least in terms of price rises. But if you look at price falls, Estupiñán, Chilwell, Saka could all go down in price. But I think in your situation, I would play the wild card. I think I would. In terms of other things I want to show you, there's the FDR. Aston Villa are now top, so Ollie Watkins looks like a sensational option over the next 5 game weeks. Crystal Palace, Spurs, Man United, and Wolves complete the top 5. In the bottom 5, we've got Chelsea, Man City, Brentford, Arsenal, and Everton. So some big names, some big clubs in the bottom 5 of that. And in terms of predicted points, Haaland is still top despite facing Arsenal away with 7.5. Heung-min Son is second. Salah, Bruno Fernandes, and Eze complete the top 5. Maddison, Rashford, Jackson, Watkins, Sterling also complete the top 10/11. So maybe some surprising things here, but this should be updated throughout the week. So I wouldn't hold this as the definitive predicted points model for Game Week 8. And if we actually take a look at some stats, the most transferred in player this week is unsurprisingly Ollie Watkins after his 23-pointer against Brighton. I sold him last week and missed out on 32 points pretty much. Of course, Alvarez got 8 overall, but that's a difference of 24 points, and I really don't want to think about that. Once you also add in the -4 hit, it is an absolute disaster. So that's FPL for you. That is life. But Watkins is definitely one of the men of the moment right now in FPL, and his price is just going to keep on increasing. He went up in price overnight. It's going to keep on going up. He is now back at the price he started the season with, and he's just a really good option overall, of course. So I do regret selling him, but we live and learn from our mistakes, and let's see if he can return very well when he's in my team. Also, Jones' red card was very soft. I think, to be honest, I still understand that decision. I think he's a bit unlucky, but ultimately he is out of control. The red card that I think was stranger is Jota, because the first challenge he made that got a yellow card was never a yellow. That was a doggy basically tripping himself up. So I think that was worse. And also, you see other examples of a doggy on a yellow card asking a player to be booked, and he doesn't get booked. So what is the rule then? That you can only be booked, for that sort of thing, time wasting, kicking the ball away, or protesting to the ref and asking for a yellow card? Can you only get a yellow card if you have none already? Can you not get a second yellow for that? So there's so many things that are very inconsistent, very unclear. But yeah, Liverpool got shafted yesterday. But then again, you could say Spurs got shafted in the past against Liverpool. Even Brighton against Spurs last year. There are so many examples. And I think ultimately every team and every fan base will feel hard done by. Corey Welsh says, keeping my wild card in case Salah or Haaland gets injured before Game Week 20. Yeah, I mean, look, there are still some perks about keeping the wildcard in your back pocket. I wish I could still do that, but I felt I needed to change at least 6-7 things. So I ended up making 10 changes on the wildcard. Yeah, Solanke, like I said, good option, but I prefer others. And Bournemouth have been pretty poor. Or at least they were poor against Arsenal. I think before that, they had a decent start to the season considering fixtures, but yeah, he's all right. I'm not going to deny that. He's a good option at his price, but there are better elsewhere. Thoughts on Alvarez and Awini partnership? I like it. But if you're going about Haaland, I would still be very worried, despite the fixtures being poor. Johnston versus Raya versus Flecken. At this moment in time, I'd rank in the way you said. And if I add Leno to the mix, it's either Leno or Johnston first. Then it'd be Raya third and Flecken fourth. I just don't trust Brentford defensively with Rico Henry and Ben Mee out. My issue is that they will acknowledge the VAR or refereeing errors afterwards, but the result of the match would remain the same. Matip with the own goal was just unfortunate. Well, yeah. Look, I think ultimately what would help a lot is transparency, maybe during the game when they're making decisions, so you can understand the thought process and, you know, you can not really question the integrity or, you know, the lack of corruption and stuff like that. But yeah, ultimately them apologising after does nothing to anybody, as Klopp said yesterday. Thoughts on a punt for Trent? Look, I like Trent historically, really good FPL option on his day. The fixtures are really good from game week 9 onwards, but I'm not sure I'd go there. I'd rather go for Trippier, I think. He's even cheaper. Newcastle are better defensively. And as good as Liverpool were yesterday, and they defended very resolutely considering the circumstances, I don't trust them defensively. And they always concede chances, whether it's with 9, 10 or 11 men. Look, Trent is a good option. If you are really feeling him, go for it. Don't let me discourage you. But I just don't trust Liverpool defensively to go for Trent. I'd rather go for Alisson instead, who's cheaper. Haaland to Darwin. Sorry, I just lost that. So apologies for that. Bear with me for a second. Yeah, well, I'm really far behind in the chat, so I'm gonna have to whiz through this. So Haaland to Darwin for next 3 game weeks, I probably wouldn't, to be honest. I like Darwin a lot, but it's not a guarantee he starts all 3 of them unless Gakpo is ruled out for a long time. Of course, I know Jota suspended, so you would expect him to start against Brighton, but against Everton, Nottingham Forest, and game weeks 9 and 10, is it a guarantee that Darwin starts? Not necessarily. Hwang and Neto are really good as a player. Yeah, they're really impressive. I have to say, Hwang Yi-chan was very lucky not to be sent off. I'm not even hating because, you know, Wolves beating Man City was good for the rest of the league, but I think Hwang Yi-chan was very lucky to stay on the pitch. Nader says, best goalkeeper 4.5 or under other than Areola. I'm fairly sure Johnston is now above that price threshold. I'll just have a quick look now, just to confirm. Otherwise, you know, he'd definitely be it. So Johnston is, let's see where he is. Yeah, he's 4.5. I think Johnston. Johnston for me is the clear winner. Leno's at 4.7 million, so doesn't really fit the criteria. It'd be Johnston. Janan says, I'm thinking of selling Trippier to afford Watkins and Alvarez on Wildcard. Too knee-jerky. Well, you're also selling a player who produced how many points? 30 points in the last 2 game weeks in Trippier, so ultimately, you have to prioritise, and you could still cover Newcastle defensively or Burn, Share, and also Lascelles for the time being. So, look, I'm not too sure about it, to be quite frank. I'd still try to have Trippier in there if possible, and I think he's a better option than Watkins long term. But it's not a bad set of moves, and ultimately, it's about the rest of your squad as well and what that could do for your funds. Islam says, Mbumo, Fernandes, Estupiñán for Trippier, Son Neto, and -4, or Son Diaby Cash. I'd go for Son Diaby Cash, but I do admit having Trippier Neto is also very, very good. And look, I like Neto, but I prefer Diaby, and I think overall that trio of Son, Diaby, Cash is even better. Do you think or feel Haaland is essential to FPL like last season, or would it be even more spread against other players points-wise? I'd argue over the next 3 or 4 game weeks, I'd say 3 game weeks, Haaland is an essential. But look, he just blanked once. Let's put it this way. He's blanked twice this season, I think it is. And off the back of a blank against Wolves, which was surprising, it's easy now to say, oh, Haaland isn't really worth it and all of this. You can do well without Haaland, but it is obviously very risky because 92% of the game have him. Over the coming weeks, there will be a shift towards selling him. His ownership should go down, but I'd still try to have him in game weeks such as game week 11 against Bournemouth. I think he can absolutely kill anybody who doesn't have him. I don't want to fearmonger. I think effective ownership isn't really ideal in FPL, but it is a way of looking at the game. And look, I can see your point, and you can cover him with Salah, Heung-min Son. You've potentially got more options nowadays for the captaincy, but I still think Haaland is someone to have. You know, he's not someone you don't want to go without for the rest of the season. Let's put it that way. Only in bursts of maybe 3 or 4 game weeks without him, and then bring him back. That's my personal take on it. And of course, my opinion can change over the course of the season. But let's not forget, he's got 8 goals in 7 games and 1 assist and 2 monstrous returns against Burnley and Fulham. So he is still capable of some great things. Ursula plus Saka to Watkins and Diaby -4. I like Watkins and Diaby a lot, but I'm not so sure about selling Saka. And I think Wolves could be tough for Aston Villa. But if you can bring Saka back in a few weeks' time, then yeah, I'd probably do it. But selling Saka for a -4 doesn't seem right for me. I won't mind if Salah scores a hat-trick next week as long as we score 4 or more. Well, Brighton games tends to be very high scoring, so I can understand that. Oh yeah, Wei saying I'm probably going to go against him. The only reason why I'd captain Haaland is to jinx him against Arsenal, but no, I think I'm going to go against him. Wei-Sing says, I think I'll do Steele, Gusto, Gvardio, and Mbumo to Johnston, Udogie, Burn, and Gordon in the future game weeks. Solid plan. I like those transfers. yeah, Johnston looks like a steal at the moment. And so long as Dean Henderson is out, I think Johnston is definitely safe and a great option in the goalkeeper position. Saka pick up a knock again, but I wouldn't really look too much into it. He should be available for Game Week 7. Always remember a fact, quality players can still shine in a big game. Of course, that is true. Haaland is definitely one of them. He scored last season at the Emirates. Milner says the team is Johnston, Flecken, Trippier, Stupinian, Kasha, Doggy, Kabore, Diaby, Saka, Bruno, Son, Bruno. I'm not sure who the other player is instead of Bruno, but there you go. Wayne, Haaland, Archer, wildcarded because of injury crisis in Game Week 4, but I'm happy with the team. Bruno to Bowen in Game Week 9. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Bruno could do well against Brentford, but I keep saying this every single week. It is quite surprising, but there you go. Thoughts about City loss against Wolves? I don't know. We can't forget that Man City have a lot of injuries. You know, they've got Kevin De Bruyne, John Stones, Bernardo Silva out. They've got Rodri suspended, so they're missing a lot of their key players. It's like Arsenal against Tottenham. They missed 5 key players, and you know, even with just 1 or 2 of them, they probably win the game. So it kind of goes, you know, every single team has had injury crises, like Chelsea and Man United this season. Liverpool had it a few years back. And Man City's depth in terms of quantity isn't as big as it would have been when they got 100 points in the Premier League season. So, yeah, you know, I never expected Man City to go unbeaten, despite their really good start to the season. But I never expected that loss against Wolves. But that's football. That's the Premier League. It's unpredictable. And that's why, for me, Arsenal going invincible, you know, in the 2003-04 season is one of the biggest achievements in world football, because to go on being in a 38-game season in England is just so difficult. There's always a team, even a Portsmouth or Wolves, you know, anybody on their day can beat you. Thoughts on dropping Haaland on wildcard? As a short-term play, I don't mind it. I'm considering it myself, and I'll talk about this in future videos. But I would try to bring him back for Game Week 11. I know Salah plays Luton there, but I would still look to sell Salah that week and then bring in Haaland potentially. But I think until Game Week 10, it's definitely a solid strategy. Let's see what else we have. Gakpo, I heard, looks like out for 6 weeks. Yeah, that would be a massive blow and very unlucky, because he literally scored and in the same action he got injured. And while cutting in Game Week 8 is Haaland a must-have, I don't think he is over the next 3 game weeks, but he's probably as close as you can be to essential in a game week like 11. And from game weeks 11 onwards, I'm probably going to try bring him back into my team. That is if I go without him in the first place, but I don't think he's essential for the next 3. I think if people have a low team value of less than 101 million, should consider a wild card. Otherwise, you'll be priced out. Yeah, some people sometimes consider these factors when playing the wild card. It's not a bad, you know, way of thinking about it. My team value isn't that great. I'm not sure how much it is, to be honest, but it's probably not too much more than 101 million. And I've played the wild card this week. Will the return of Anthony improve Rashford and Bruno? I don't think so. Even when Anthony was in, you know, on the pitch in the first 4 or 5 game weeks, he wasn't really offering anything. And last season as well, irrespective of Anthony's performances, Bruno and Rashford did really well last season. So I don't think so. Of course, it could help Man United in general, and it gives them more depth in that position. But I don't think Anthony offers much in, you know, just overall. Diaby or Almiron on the wild card? Diaby all day long for me. If he's fit, of course, he's got a bit of a knock now. Let's keep an eye on the updates, but Diaby's a much better option for me. Haaland or Salah? Over the next 3, Salah. Overall, Haaland is still the better option for me. Singh says, crap game week. Any plans to wildcard if you can't afford Salah for game week 8? Well, I've already played the wildcard, and I'll talk about this in the best wildcard team video and the team selection. So that also answers a few other questions about am I wildcarding this week. But I might not go with Salah, and it sounds really crazy because he's one of the best captaincy options, if not the best, in game weeks 9, 10, and 11. And I'd love to have Salah in my team, but in order to do so, I would have to drop either Saka, Heung-min Son, Trippier, or Haaland. And I think the best way of doing it is to either drop either Son, Trippier, or Haaland. So it's really tricky for me, I think, to fit all of these players in, but I might have to do that. Hi, Dylan. Yep, that's covered. Foden to Son. Yeah, I would do that. Foden is still a really good option. Could do well at the Emirates, but I'd go to Son. I've played the wildcard text, so that is my early transfer plans. See, on the same team without Rodri. Yeah, of course, it's only 1 game, and they still dominated. They should have won it, but of course, he makes a massive difference. He's probably their most important player, but I'll maintain what I said earlier. I think Man City were probably hard done by the refereeing decisions yesterday. And, for example, Hwang Hee-chan should have been sent off, and overall, they still deserve to win. Saka to Son -4 this game week. In that sort of move, and if you're going to captain Son, I think it's worth it. But Saka is still a good option, even against Man City, and he's not the type of player you want to sell for a -4. But overall, I'd say, yeah, it's a good move. Watkins and Bowen or Isak and Maddison on the wildcard. It'd be Watkins and Bowen. But Maddison is still a really good option. I'd love to have him in that game against Luton Town. He's blanked in every single home game this season, but he's returned in every single away fixture. Yeah, Ruben Dias really unlucky with the own goal. I think he played well apart from that. And I think Cash is an upgrade, so I would do it. Is Turner going to keep his place in Nottingham Forest? Long term, no. I think it's only a matter of time before Vlaco Dimos becomes the #1 goalkeeper, which is a bit of a shame for Turner, but I think today he was a bit shaky. So my prediction is no, he's not going to keep it. Saka's still going to drop in price tonight. Looking forward to a Saka hat-trick against City. I mean, I'd love that, but I don't think he'll score a hat-trick. Maybe 1 goal. And in terms of going down in price, yeah, that is a good point. I might sell him because of that. Do you think Trippier is essential? No. He's a really good option. One of the best defenders in isolation, but he's not essential because going for Trippier might mean no Salah, Haaland, Son, or Saka, for example. You might miss one of those 4 really good assets as well by having Trippier. And if you go for double Newcastle defence with Lascelles for the time being and Burn, you can cover Trippier that way. Saliba to Cash now before price rise. I like Saliba a lot against Chelsea and Sheffield United, but Cash has really good long-term fixtures. I'd probably do it. The only thing is, if you want Saliba back, you're going to lose that value you built up in him. If you look at the stats, City were all over Wolves. Yeah, exactly that. And Wolves are very fortunate, of course. You need luck to go your way to beat Man City. That's the way it is. And look, I expect Man City to respond against Leipzig and Arsenal. They're still a top team without Rodri, and they're a wounded animal. And yeah, just don't underestimate Man City because for some reason now everyone starts to believe, oh, we can win the league or something. Let's calm down. Man City is still the team to beat. Alan says, hi Dylan, my team value adds up to 100.7 million, but when I take out all my players, it shows I have 99.7 million. Yeah, good question. It's because of selling and purchase value. So the way it works, I'll give you an example here. By the way, I've been showing the screen for far too long, so I do apologize. So let's go to this, for example. Let's use Bukayo Saka. So he started this season at 8.5 million. And let's say you had him from Game Week 1. He goes up to 8.6 million. In terms of selling value, he is still going to be 8.5 million because the way it works is once a player that you have goes up in price by 0.2 million, you gain 0.1 million in terms of selling value. So once Saka went up to 8.7 million, you are now able to sell him for 8.6 million. That's the way it works. So that's probably why it says, oh, you've got 100.7 million, but when you look to sell everyone, it's only 99.7 million. So hopefully you do get that. That is the main reason why. Hi Dylan, I'm going to wildcard. Which one is better, Bruno or Julian? Julian. I like Bruno still, but Alvarez is a better option. Different positions, difficult to compare, but Alvarez is cheaper. He's fixture-proof. He's on free kicks. Really good option overall, so Alvarez. Broodbeast says, hi Dylan, who to start in Game Week 8 between Morris and Soufal, both at home? That is a great question, Broodbeast. Thank you for it. I'm not going to lie, I probably have to think about that, but I'd probably go for Carlton Morris, I think. I know he's facing Spurs, but Spurs still leak a lot of chances despite their great start to the season. So I think I'd go for Carlton Morris, Let me know what you're looking, to go for, but I'd go for Morris. Darwin a buy on wildcard should be nailed with Gakpo injury. Yeah, look, that is true, and Jota suspended, but I'm pretty sure it's only 1 game suspension. So yeah, my problem with Darwin is he will start against Brighton, but is he going to start against Everton and Nottingham Forest? It's not a guarantee, but he is a good option. In terms of forwards, I think the way to rank it, especially with Wilson, and his injury problems recently, is Watkins, Alvarez, Awani, Darwin Nunez, and, well, I'd say either Isak or Wilson, whoever you back to start for Newcastle, but I'd rank the other 4 a bit above. What's going on with Arsenal penalty taker? Not much, really. Just what we saw from Crystal Palace. Saka and Odegaard are the 2 penalty takers. Saka's #1, Odegaard's #2. They can switch it around. It looks like in every home game, Saka takes the penalties, and in the away games, it's Odegaard. And they gave it to Havertz to boost his confidence. It was a move by Odegaard. He decided to, to do it. He was encouraging Jesus and also Saka to give the penalty to Havertz. And I think that's a great move, sign of great team spirit. But ultimately, Saka and Odegaard are the penalty takers. You have a final decision to activate Wildcard? I've activated already, so there's no decision to be made. Ibsy says, do you think Diaby will be fit for Sunday? Of course, it's difficult for me to say concretely, you know, it's all going to be a matter of opinion. It's not going to be objective, but I think he will be available. It only looked like a knock for me. If not, will do Alvarez to Watkins be a good move? Yes, it still would be. And Alvarez is a good option, by the way. Don't rule him out against scoring against Man United, Arsenal, Brighton, anybody really. But I think he is a good move. And I agree with you. He is really good value. I don't have a wildcard draft to show. Like I said, I want to save that for the best wildcard team video and the team selection because I'm going to talk about the wildcard plenty this week. So I'm going to save it for that. But in terms of players, you know my thinking in terms of the best options on the wildcard. It's going to be similar to last week, but there's a few changes here and there. Is this a good wildcard team, says E.G. Ryan? Yes, it is a good wildcard team. Of course it is. But yeah, I would get rid of Botman, I think. Even if he's not out for too long and we've got an international break, he's going to miss Game Week 8 and I would look to sell him. So yeah, Botman's the one to change there. You could go for Lascelles as a short-term punt or just Dan Burn. Gabriel's a really good choice at 4.7 million. I like it. And yeah, overall, good squad. A bit concerned about Turner. If you have enough money, I would do Turner to Johnston or Leno. But yeah, overall, apart from Turner and Botman, even Kabore potentially, I think it's a really good wildcard squad. Really good. It's been a brutal season if you haven't owned Watkins, Son and Trippier at the right time. Yeah, I completely agree. It sucks that it all comes to these marginal choices between a few players. Yeah, and that's obviously a consequence of FPL being very template-based. So a lot of us have similar teams, but depending on when you have certain assets at the right time, as you say, that's a very good point. You know, that makes the world of difference. And me selling Watkins last week has been a disastrous decision. I don't even want to think about how many points I'd have and what rank I'd be if I'd kept Watkins amongst the other decisions like bringing in Botman this week for a -4, only for him to miss out for a month. So yeah, there's a few things that obviously have really swung the other way. 50-50 calls. Last week I was looking to bring in Botman against Sheffield United. I didn't do it for a -4. In the end, he scores a really big return. So that's FPL for you sometimes. You've got to take on the chin. So let's see what else we have. Botman out for which defender? Nothing in the bank. I'd go for Dan Burn, I think, or yeah, you can't go for Matikash, can you? So yeah, I'd go for Dan Burn or Lascelles. The thing with Lascelles though is he's just a really cheap enabler and a short-term pun. He's not someone you want to trust long-term. So yeah, I think Dan Burn could be a good like-for-like replacement. Turner over Onana this game week. Not even sure Turner starts, to be honest. Good question. Brentford aren't in the best of form themselves. I think Palace will score against Forest, so I'd go for Onana. But then again, I keep going from every single week and he's been terrible, apart from the Burnley game and Wolves at home in Game Week 1. Foden or Saka, it'd be Saka. Twister Parky says Botman out for Burn or keep Botman, swap Bowen for Maddison, but we'll have to start Archer with only Lamptey fit to bench or do both for a -4. I have Botman out and Gordon out. So yeah, if you do Botman out for Burn, I think that's a good move. I'm not expecting a clean sheet against West Ham, but that's a good move. If you have to start Archer in either scenario, then I'd probably do a -4, Twister Parky. Lager says, hello Dylan, how could we remove Watkins? What do you think about Neto to Diaby or Morris to Watkins? From those two moves, I would do Morris to Watkins. And look, Morris is a decent option at his price and below. I've always said that, but Watkins is a clear upgrade with the fixtures and with Neto's form. I wouldn't want to bin him right now. I know Diaby's a great option, even better than Neto, but I'd do Morris to Watkins for me. I have to bench either Morris or Neto, depends on the replacement. Yeah, I get that, but let me know what your preference is, but I'd do Morris to Watkins. Crazy to think that Alvarez has 46 total points and Haaland 53, only 7-point difference for a 7 million difference. That is true, and that's why a lot of people now are flooding my comments saying Haaland's not essential, you know, I can go without him, and I understand it, and on my wildcard, I might go without him for 2 or 3 weeks. It could kill me, of course it could, but I think it's worth a risk over the next 2 or 3, and then ahead of Bournemouth in Game Week 11, get that guy back in your team because I could see a hat-trick there, or a brace at the very least. Luton versus Spurs is early kickoff. Yeah, that's true. I saw that, and that's a really good point. Is it going to be the early kickoff curse, as Gandhi says? I don't know where that came from, by the way, that Gandhi quote, but yeah. Look, Luton could cause some problems for Spurs, but ultimately, Heung-min Son and Maddison should still produce some big returns there. Welcome, Ed Mers. Hi, Dylan. You're always positive for struggling FPL subscribers, and I know you'll reverse your current form. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I went from 6.5 million to top 500k by Christmas last year. Comeback can be done. Yeah, I appreciate that, Ed Mers, and I agree. I was probably in a similar situation before I even made videos and streams. This was in a time where I wasn't an active FPL manager. I made transfers every so often, and when I did, I took massive hits. I mean, massive. I'm not sure exactly where I was. I was around 1 to 3 million at Christmas, and in the end, I finished top 100k, won my mini league by 100 points despite trailing by 90. So I'm always quite, calm. There's always moments where you kind of doubt yourself or your decision making, but ultimately, it's just FPL points at the end of the day, and there's still a long way to go. So I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I'm quite confident on the wildcard to bounce back. Hopefully, anyone else watching who's also maybe having a bad start will be able to do so. And hopefully, Ed Mers, you do very well this season. Oliver Ray says, we've bottoming out. Do you think Lascelles at 3.9 is a good short-term punt? Definitely. I mentioned him a few times already in this video. And if you need an enabler at 3.9, 4 million as your fifth defender, I think Lascelles is a very good short-term punt. Unfortunately, he's probably only going to start in Game Week 8, and after the international break, Botman could be back. But he is a good option for the time being. We have a climb to do, Dylan, definitely. That's, I can't even say the statement now. What is it called? Saying the least? I don't even know. I'm even forgetting these little statements, these sayings. Is Haaland a must-have on the wildcard? I don't think so. Once again, I have to reiterate, over the next 2 or 3 game weeks, I think you can go without Haaland. Pick Salah instead, captain him in game weeks 9 and 10, and then bring Haaland back in for Bournemouth in game week 11. But even Man United, Arsenal and Brighton, they're not the worst fixtures for Haaland. Arsenal gift a lot of goals at the Emirates. Man United aren't looking good, and Man City should overpower them and outplay them at their stadium. So yeah, I still think Haaland's a good option, and let's not forget how explosive he is and how consistent he is. He has 8 goals in 7 games. Let's not forget that. But he's not an absolute must-have right now. Wildcard this week, I've activated already. Opinion on wildcarding in Game Week 10 to cope with post-international break drama. Yeah, that is always the ideal sort of thing, but I had too many fires to put out for my team, and I've had basically 5 back-to-back red arrows after a decent start in Game Weeks 1 and 2, so I felt like I needed to, but it's a team-dependent question, of course. I think this period between Game Weeks 8 to 10 is a good time to wildcard for most people. Is Maddison worth it on the wildcard? Yeah, I still think he's worth it. And I do prefer Maddison over Saka for the next 2 to 3 game weeks, I'd say. But overall, Saka is the better option for me. And yeah, that's a good way of looking at it in terms of having Son and keeping Saka and binning Maddison. It's not a bad decision by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, Neto, good option. Someone I haven't talked about enough, I'll be honest. Even though he had a good pre-season, because of his historical data, not many goals and assists for his time at Wolves, and the way Wolves are, they don't score enough goals. They're always very, very, I'd say toothless in front of goal. I've never really recommended him, but we have to take notice. He's getting assists against the likes of Man City. He's a constant nuisance to the best defenders in the world, like Nathan Ake, so he is a good option at the moment. He definitely is. Mohammed says 2 free transfers, Rashford and Bruno to Son and Maddison. I would do it, honestly. I like Bruno still, and I think Rashford could do well. I keep saying this, but I'm still going to be insistent on it. I think he will bounce back, but I think those are good transfers, and ultimately Spurs assets, despite the early kickoff curse, they should do the goods and do really well for you. Thoughts on having a front three of Haaland, Alvarez and Watkins? If you are going for a front three, that is the best. It simply is. In terms of points, you're not going to get more than you will from those 3. But my preference overall is to go for 5 midfielders, because I know you might still go for it and you might have the funds to do so, but having 5 midfielders and 3 forwards means you're going to have to bench one of them. And when you look at midfielders, there are so many choices. You've got Bowen, James Ward-Prowse, Son, Maddison, Bruno Fernandes, Saka, Phil Foden. There are so many choices you're going to lose count. Mohamed Salah. So I'd rather invest more in the midfield and have a midfield 5 and stick with 2 forwards. But that is the best front 3 possible for me. Can't wait to see Mitoma destroying Trent next week. Oh yes, possible. And I would still like Mitoma in that fixture. But the likes of Estupinian, I don't expect a clean sheet, and you're then relying on an attack and return, and you saw how that paid off this week. And I do apologise to those that I said start Estupinian over cash. I did say that, because the way I thought of it is I back Aston Villa to win a little bit more than Brighton, but I think Estupinian is more capable of attack and returns. He came close to scoring at 0-0, didn't do so, and the rest is history. But yeah, I think Matoma could do well. What do you think of Pedro Porro for Diaz? For Ruben Diaz, that is, yeah. Pedro Porro is probably the best Spurs defender right now. Not as nailed as a doggy, and he can be, maybe not inconsistent, but he can be a bit frustrating. But yeah, I think he's probably the best Spurs defender in the game, and he is worth the extra 0.2, 0.3 million over a doggy. If I can afford it, I would go there, but in terms of price, you have to take that into account, and that's why a doggy is very likely to remain in my wildcard squad. Messi Monkey asks, how is this wildcard? It's very good. You've got some really good options in there. I'm just a bit concerned about Turner. I know you've got Areola already, but I would go for Johnston or Leno if possible. Your defense looks really good. Your midfield as well. Awani as well, good pick. And you've got Alvarez, so I'm guessing that's no Haaland, is it? So no Haaland, but you've got Salah, Son. Yeah, so a really good squad. I think, yeah, you've got Saka on the bench. That's fair enough. I'm not too sure about benching Alvarez and Saka, I'll be quite honest with you. I'm a bit apprehensive about that. But yeah, really apart from Haaland, you've got most of the key assets that I would recommend on the wildcard. Son captain next week, yes, it's him or Maddison for me in terms of the pecking order. Even Salah's not a bad shout against Brighton, especially if they defend the way they did against Aston Villa. So yeah, I think the two Spurs assets are the best on paper this week. Who would you remove, Rashford or Bruno? Rashford. I said it last week, despite me being insistent on Rashford doing well against Palace and Brentford, but Bruno is a better long-term option. Skippo also puts his wildcard, so a lot of people are playing the wildcard this week. That's interesting to see. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Once again, in terms of improvements, maybe Kabore. Not a huge fan of Luka Dean, to be quite frank. I'd rather go for Matty Cash if possible. But yeah, your midfield looks really good. You could make a case for going for Bowen or Ward-Prowse instead of Matoma for now, or even Mbeumo. But you could also argue booking in transfers isn't ideal. So yeah, overall, really good squad. I like it. Apart from a few nitpicks here and there, like Kabore and Luka Dean, I think the rest looks fantastic. With wildcard, regardless, some players you want, should you just pick players that will rise? Well, you can to begin with, but remember, if a player rises, you're not going to gain anything in selling value. The only thing it does is protect you just in case you want that player ultimately by the end. So the way it works on the wild card or even with free transfers is once a player goes up in price by 0.2 million, whilst he's in your squad, you will gain 0.1 million in terms of selling value. So that's the way it works. But you can do that just in case you decide, oh, I want Heung-min Son or I want Salah, and you've already covered that price rise and you aren't priced out of that move, if that makes sense. Next game week, top four will change. I don't know how, but it will. Oh yeah, it definitely could. You know, if Arsenal, Man City draw, you know, even if Arsenal lose or something, you know, they could drop out of the top four entirely. It's just really tight at the top at the moment. But for me, the three best teams in the league are Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool. I really think that. Then you've got probably Spurs, Aston Villa around 4th and 5th, but things change so quickly, you can't judge. After Game Week 1, you know, we all thought, oh, Aston Villa, why did we think they're the dark horses? They're terrible. You just have to give things time. Even United and Chelsea can bounce back, but yeah, it's just really, really volatile at the moment, just like FPL. Things change so quickly. Lager says, I prefer the same. When's Martinelli back? He could be back for Man City in Game Week 8, but I'd be quite confident about Game Week 9 for sure against Chelsea after the international break, but yeah, in terms of Man City is a possibility, but not a certainty. So I'd say within the next few weeks, let's wait and see when that is exactly. We don't have a conclusive timeline on that. But yeah, remember, after Game Week 8, there is an international break. So those wildcarding now, you know, a bit of risk involved, of course. But yeah, I think Martinelli should be available for Game Week 9, definitely. Hopefully his injury isn't aggravated in that time. So we've got over 200 people watching. I do appreciate that, but only 67 likes. Let's keep on pushing towards 150 likes and beyond. And as I said, our aim is to get to 21,000 subscribers by the Tuesday deadline stream for UCL Fantasy. There will be a team selection video tomorrow for Match Day 2. I'll be revealing whether I'm going for the Limitless or the Wildcard. You've got the best Limitless and Wildcard team videos already out on the channel. There's also a chip strategy guide and the deadline stream on Tuesday around 3:30 p.m. UK time. So be sure not to miss it. And for FPL, You've also got the team selection video where I'm going to be playing my wildcard, the best wildcard team, where I'll try to show some different drafts for you lot, maybe one with Salah and one without, like I did last week. But there are some key changes from last week to this time round. Early kickoff for Luton Spurs, yeah, that's my only concern, to be honest. Apart from that, I think Spurs will do really well. Aggressive time, Dylan. Yeah, I've made a few aggressive transfers this season and they haven't paid off, but with this wild card, I'm not even sure if you can class it as aggressive, but there will be a few things I'll do that could be perceived as aggressive, if you will. The only issue going without Haaland is getting him back in one move later. Yeah, that's true. One thing I'm considering is covering Haaland with Alvarez over the next 2 to 3 game weeks and going for a front two of Watkins and Alvarez and having Salah in the midfield. And then in game week 11, bring in Bowen for Salah, and that gives me the funds to do Haaland in for Alvarez. So I could do that as well. Bring back the Mystic Beard, Dylan. It's already growing quite a bit, actually. I shaved literally last week. I'm kind of getting mixed messages. Some people are saying, oh, wow, he's looking really good. And it's not my conscience saying that, by the way. And then there's other people saying never shave again. So you just can't please everybody. Twisted Parky says, oh, Jesus, I'm so far behind. Okay, thanks. If I do swap Burn for Botman, I won't have to start Archer. Yeah, I'd go for Burn in for Botman, mate. I think that's the way to go. All right, so let's see what else we have. I appreciate all the kind words and all the messages. I'll try to get through them all. Our wildcard game week 9, that's fair enough, after the international break where injuries could happen. Mbuma to Diaby for a -4. And can I bench Botman for a Stupinian or should I sell Botman? I have cash and a doggy already. So remember, Diaby has a knock and that could be a concern. I think he'll be fine personally. But yeah, bench Botman for a Stupinian. I would do that move. Mbuma to Diaby, if he's cleared fit and there's no issues there whatsoever, that's a really good long-term move. And then I'd bench a Stupinian. EG says, I have 0.4 million in the bank. Should I get rid of Son to get funds to maybe upgrade James or Prowse to someone? If so, for who? Thanks a lot. I'd still be quite happy with James Ward-Prowse. I understand your situation because I'm in the same predicament. But I would keep Son and keep James Ward-Prowse. Twan says, hi Dylan, please bench 2. I would bench... Yeah, I'd bench a Stupinian and Dan Burn. I'd start the other 3. I've done terribly this week. Didn't want a wild card, but maybe it wasn't the right decision. Yeah, I can see that. I also wanted to hold off, but I ended up doing it. But let's wait and see. Is Botman out for 1 month? Yes, but remember, that's... You know, if he is out for 1 month, of course, let's wait and see the confirmation. He's probably going to miss 2 game weeks, you know, maybe 3. He's not going to be out that long term, but of course, he is still plenty of games, including the Champions League against Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah, Soufal, look, he's not the worst pick, but facing Newcastle and Aston Villa next, I don't see a clean sheet. Long term, decent enabler, but I'd rather go elsewhere. Even Joachim Andersen, Matty Cash, and you've got other options there. So he's not my favourite, despite the assist yesterday. I found it interesting how people say so many mids there is to choose, but in 7 game weeks, it seems very few people have found the right combination. I think it's because every single game week, new midfielders pop up, or you don't have like the same midfielder hauling every single week, really. So that's probably a good reason why. Is Alisson a good pick? Yeah, he still is for me. I recommended him in a wildcard video around game week 5, I think it was, or game week 4. I still think he is a good pick, but when you've got Johnston, Leno, and Areola, I don't think you need to spend that much in the goalkeeper position. Good alternative for suspended Gordon. Sell or bench and bring him back after suspension. I'd probably bench him this week because he's a good long-term option, and at least you've got that headache out of the way, him being suspended already, which of course isn't ideal, but there you go. If you were to sell him, you could go to Neto or James Ward-Prowse, which could be affordable to you, and James Ward-Prowse is my preference, but Neto is a good option too at the moment. Estupiñán was third on my bench and still getting subbed on. Yeah, I literally took a -4 for Botman, and Estupiñán comes on for me anyway. So it's just one of those things, isn't it? But those -2 points were inevitable in our team. Got 66 this week. Happy with the score this week. Anderson was clutch. Yeah, really good stuff. And I'd be very happy with 66, of course. And Anderson is a really good option at the moment for his price. I wouldn't double up with him and Johnston, but having one of them is definitely viable. JP, welcome. What are your thoughts on Watkins versus Wolves? Yeah, I think it will be a harder game. I definitely don't expect a 6-1. I know you might just think of it as, well, Aston Villa just beat Brighton 6-1 and Brighton beat Wolves 4-1, so surely Aston Villa win. Football does not work that way. But Watkins is just a long-term purchase, and the fixtures there are great. Even if he doesn't haul massively, he's only blanked once this season, so his consistency has been very good from both assists and goals. And yeah, he's just one of the best forwards in the game right now. I forgot to say I have Watkins wildcard in my team as well. That's good stuff. Saka or Watkins on the wildcard. I still prefer Saka, I'll be honest. Watkins has better fixtures, but yeah, overall, Saka's the better FPL option. On the wildcard now, considering the games coming up, and you could even bench Saka this week or sell him, I'd say Watkins, but it's not a long-term thing. It definitely isn't. I'm only saying it for the fixtures. Saka is, for me, still a much better FPL option long-term until the end of the season. Bubutak Callan says, hi Dylan, great to watch, great content as always. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Yasser VR says, should I do Alvarez and Botman out for Watkins and Lascelles? If it's for free, then I probably would. Nunez plus Diaby or Watkins and Bowen? That's a great question. I like both duos, and Nunez will become very popular. He will start against Brighton, and if he gets a start against Forest and or Everton, he could do extremely well, even better than Watkins. But I would go for the certainty of Watkins and Bowen, because once Jota comes back from suspension and once Gakpo returns from injury, which could be 6 weeks, I'm not sure exactly, the timeline for that, Darwin is just going to be a rotation risk. Went from okay, could have been a better game week, to an absolute stinker this week. Yeah, I'll be honest, once I saw Watkins score a hat-trick, I already feared the worst. I thought I'm just going to do badly, and it's not been the worst red arrow, but another 500,000 places down so far, and I'm relying on Sterling to save me, so it's not looking good. So I understand that. Don't worry, mate. There's still a long way to go, and in Game Week 8, there's plenty of chance to bounce back. A lot of fixture swings coming along. We've got a double game week, potentially in Game Week 20, and we've got the chips still to use as well. Juan says, hi Dylan, please help me. Watkins, Alvarez, Haaland, Son, Maddison, Almiron, Bowen, 6.1 million mid. Who? Well, it'd be Neto right now, considering suspensions. Once Gordon is available, I'd go to him. Or Watkins, Haaland, Son, Maddison, Almiron, Bruno, Bowen for wildcard long-term strategy. Look, they're both good. I don't know how many players that is. Is it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? So good set of 7 players there, but I think what lets down the second set of players is Almiron. I'm still not a big fan of him despite the fixtures. I'd go for the first set of players. Who should be captain next week? Roughly, I'd say Heung-min Son, Maddison. It's really close, I think, to separate those two, but Maddison's away record is impeccable, and Heung-min Son playing down the middle is obviously really appealing. So they're my top 2 options. Then I'd probably put Salah in the top 4. Maybe not third, but he is in the top 4. I'm probably forgetting somebody else as well. As good as Saka is, I wouldn't captain him against Man City. So yeah, probably Haaland is still up there, but he's a bit lower down than usual. I think the top 2 are the Spurs options of Rashford. I just saw Rashford, sorry, in another message. It'd be Son and Maddison. Rashford told me he will start scoring points in January. Yeah, he had a really good run from January last season. I do remember that. I've had Sterling for 3 game weeks and he's got 2 points in every game, exactly. I have him for Fulham and Burnley. Yeah, I think Burnley is the one where he'll return. I don't expect anything against Fulham. I love Alisson for his save points potential. Yeah, that is true. Then again, I don't think he would have made anywhere near that amount of saves if it wasn't for the 9 men and the way that game turned out to be. The thing with Alisson, though, is that Liverpool still concede goals, and they concede so many chances. Against West Ham, it was the same thing, and every single game they looked like conceding. I think yesterday they defended very well, probably their best defensive performance of the season, and they were very unlucky not to go away with a point. But yeah, Alisson's a good option. I'm just not so sure if he justifies that price tag when you've got Johnston, Leno, and Areola. Sterling to Bowen or Mbeumo to Diaby. Well, I've done a wild card, so I've technically made both transfers already, the exact same you've made or suggested. So I do appreciate the kind words and the comments, but I've got rid of both. Thank God. I would have just left Botman on the bench if Gordon had not got suspended. Yeah, he got an assist, but your caution last week was spot on. Would have been okay. The thing is with Gordon, I still liked him as an option. He's had a really good start to the season, another attacking return, but whenever you see a suspension risk like Jackson and Gordon, you fear the worst. Sometimes your player will be a bit smarter and go 3-4 games without it, and then the yellow cards reset, but not the case this time out. Keep Awani for now? Yeah, I'd say so. Awani is still a good option. We can't forget that. Last chance for Sterling to show something. Yeah, hopefully he does something against Fulham. And he's probably a good option against Burnley, but ultimately I don't trust Chelsea. Also, Hwang Hee-chan, yeah, him and Neto look really good. I still prefer Neto a little bit more. And I do think Hwang Hee-chan was a bit fortunate not to be sent off before he scored the winner. But he is a good FPL option at the moment. Not my favourite, but if you're looking for a budget midfielder, especially as a Gordon replacement, he could be it. How about Ruben for Burn and Foden for Son? I'd do it. I really would. Ruben is still a good option despite the fixtures, but yeah, Burn and Son should outscore the other two. Gonna wildcard and try Nunes and Haaland up front. I like that. I really do. Nunes is still right up there for me. Watkins is not only a good option up in the ball in the net, he supports others so well. Yeah, that's why he got so many assists so far this season. I'm just really frustrated about the timing. You know, a lot of people sold him and then he starts scoring, but that's FPL sometimes. Thoughts on Maddison being a better captaincy over Son? That is definitely a debate. As I said, his away record is impeccable, whilst Heung-min Son hauled against Arsenal and Burnley, but I don't think he's as consistent as Maddison. But yeah, I think Maddison could do really well here. Of course, that's a good point. It's really 50-50 for me. I think Son playing down the middle edges him, you know, as the leading captaincy figure for me, but Maddison is really close. It's literally 50-50. The fixture looks better for Maddison playing against a low block. Yeah. If Luton Town play really defensively like Sheffield United, I'd rather back Maddison for sure. Twan says, hi Dylan, play Areola or Pickford? I would go for... It's a good question. It's a tough one, really. I'm not really expecting anything from either. That's a really good question. Jesus. I'd probably go for Areola. I think Bournemouth will score. Trippier's captain. Against West Ham, probably not. But in fixtures like Burnley, of course, I was open to it, as I said yesterday. But against West Ham, I think Newcastle will concede, so probably not. What about having Foden, Alvarez, Saka beside Haaland facing each other? I mean, there's still really good options in the weeks to come. I'm not that concerned about it. But, yeah, if you've also got, let's say, 3 or 4 other fires to put out, then I would maybe justify the wild card. But I don't think that's enough reason to play the chip. I used to play fantasy football when I was in the newspapers. I started this in COVID and now I'm hooked. Yeah, I'll be honest. I started fantasy football around 2017-18. It wasn't even FPL at the time. I played casually for a season or two after that, and yeah, ever since I've played it a bit more seriously, let's say, especially when I started making videos. So yeah, it's been around for such a long time. It's quite surprising to see that. Yeah, look, Alvarez is still a great option. Let's not forget it. And having him over Watkins could be your gateway to having Trippier at the back or Son, Salah in the midfield. And if that's the case, I'd just stick with Alvarez. But if you can afford the upgrade, I would go to Watkins because of the fixtures and the form. And Alvarez is still in red-hot form, by the way, but Watkins is looking imperious at the moment. I have Edison, Botman, and Purvis Estupinian. Who should I get rid of? Only one free transfer. Probably Botman. Estupinian has a fixture swing in Game Week 10. Edison is far too expensive for what he offers, but Man City should still keep plenty of clean sheets, even in this difficult fixture run. So I think Botman right now. I use Draft Hound. Sometimes it messes with my instincts. Do you have any recommendations? With Draft Hound, I use it as a guide. I think they have some very good algorithms, you know, instead of, for example, like chances of scoring goals and also looking at the fixtures. I think they're very helpful from that perspective. And they do suggest some really good transfers. And ultimately, I find myself, you know, I don't base my transfers off Draft Hound, but I ultimately find that Draft Hound kind of support what I'm looking to do. Now, so far this season, I made some very bad transfers and I've been a bit unlucky in some of them, but I still think Draft Hound is very, very reliable, and over the course of the season, it will help you more often than not. I'm so the straw ended on 25 points. I do feel for you, mate. I'm also having a stinker this week, but like I always say to people, there's always someone worse off than you, and you've got to be grateful for what you have. I know if you're at 3 million rank or 7 million, whatever it may be, it's not ideal, but there's still a long way to go. It's 7 game weeks in, plenty of double game weeks to come, the chips to use, and we've got a lot of fixture swings which could also play a part. Would you wildcard? Good question. You've got some really good players in there. I think I would because, Jay Ward, because you've got Pickford, Turner. I think they're 2 goalkeepers you could improve on. Botman is an injury doubt for the next 2 or 3 game weeks potentially. The rest of your defense is fine, but I'd also say Kabore. So that's 4 players already. I'd also say Mbeumo, Rashford, and potentially Osula and Alvarez. So I think overall, the wild card could really help you this week. It really could. Is it safe to sell Julian for 3 game weeks? Yeah, I think so. He's still a really good option, by the way, in the next 3. Wang Hee-chan has massive. I saw him come on at the Amex, huge. I actually saw Brighton versus Wolves last season 6-0, and I think Wang Hee-chan played. I don't remember. All I remember is Brighton putting the ball in the back of the net. M. Logulo says, hello, your streams are great. Make easy listening. Love it. Thumbs up. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. I'm surprised there's not more comments criticizing my rank and my poor start to the season, but I do appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. Best goalkeeper for next week's. I'd say either Johnston/Leno, and the other one would be Areola. So those 3 goalkeepers for me are just really good value for money. Do you think triple Villa and triple Spurs is good? Yeah, I think so. Of course, you can then sell some of them. You know, one sort of strategy is to go for Son, and then in game week 10, for example, sell him to Saka. But ultimately, having 2 or 3 Spurs and Aston Villa players looks really viable. If Son has been carrying a niggle, is he a risk of being on the bench against a pretty, let's see what you said, a pretty hopeless Luton? I still think Son will play. That is true. You raise a good point that, you know, Son came off against Liverpool because, you know, he had an injury problem, he had a niggle, and he was discussing with Postecoglou, and he played as many minutes as he could. So that is a good point, but I'd still be very confident of him starting. Hi, do they add money in the bank to your team value? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but the way team value works is, you know, the team you build in Game Week 1, you know, the players you have, they will either go up or down in price. You know, every single day pretty much, you've got price rises and falls as soon as the Game Week 1 deadline passed. And once a player goes up in price or goes down in price by 0.2 million, actually, no, sorry, let me rephrase that. In terms of purchase versus selling value, when a player goes up in 0.2 million, you will gain 0.1 million in terms of selling value. In terms of price falls, you just lose the money outright. Maddison and Gordon or Bowen and Diaby? I'd go for Bowen and Diaby, but both are good duos. Of course, with Gordon, he is suspended now. Mbuma to Matoma? Not yet. I would save that for Game Week 10. I really like Mbuma against Burnley in Game Week 9. And if you compare that to Matoma, he faces Man City away in the same game week. Welcome, J War. So I wasn't here. Yeah, like I said, with your team, I would wildcard because Pickford, Turner, Botman, Kabore, I'd say Mbeumo, Rashford, and Osula, they're all sells, and potentially Alvarez too. So I think there's like 6-7 changes to make, and I think it's worth a wildcard. Thank you, Mona. Have a good night as well. Lascelles for Botman. Good short-term punt, but once Botman comes back, Lascelles will lose a spot, of course, and it shouldn't be too long. I'd say 2 or 3 game weeks based on the rumours we're getting. I would want Watkins, but Trippier looks like he could generate some serious points moving forwards. Plus, I really want Son and Salah. That's the thing. You have to find that balance. And as good as Watkins was in the last 2 weeks, there was a reason why a lot of people sold him, because he didn't score for the first 5 game weeks of the season. If you had to play free budget players in any outfield position, where and who would you pick? If you had to play free budget players, good question. I think Lascelles for the time being. He's not ideal against West Ham, but he is a good 3.9 million enabler. In terms of other budget options, I mean, could you count Neto for that? Or Hwang Hee-chan, potentially? It really depends what kind of budget we're talking about, because if it's like 4 million defenders, 4.5 million forwards, you're not going to get too many names off me. But yeah, let me know. Already have Cash or Doggy. Would you play a Kanji versus Arsenal or a Stupinian versus Liverpool? Probably a Kanji. Mohammed says current team: Turner, Trippier, Botman, Cash, Maddison, Diaby, Salah, Son, Haaland, Darwin, subs, Areola, Kabore, Mbama, and Gordon. I have 1 free transfer. What changes would you make? Well, I think the biggest concern for you, I mean, you got Areola, to be fair. He's fine. I'd actually start him over Turner, I think. Yeah, I think Botman is just the one to sell. Especially if he is out for a few weeks. So, yeah, I think Botman to Burn as a like-for-like is fine. You could also do Botman to Lascelles as a short-term punt, or even Botman to Gabriel. The thing with Gabriel is he faces Man City this week, so that's more of a long-term play. So I think Botman to Burn could be your best move there. Since Botman and Gordon is out, should I take Botman to Burn, or should I take a -4 by removing Trippier to a doggy? No, a -4 getting rid of Trippier is not worth it. So just do Botman to Burn, I think. Might not be ideal this week, but it's a good long-term move. Are you convinced as a comeback in UCL Fantasy? Yeah, I'm convinced I'll do better. Maybe not to the same level as I did in previous seasons. UCL Fantasy, I generally do better than in FPL, but I'm quite confident I will bounce back in FPL and UCL Fantasy, to be fair. Kabore on Wildcard or not? No. Of course, if you need a 4 million defender, he's one of the better ones, but for the time being, I'd go for Lascelles. Also for me in Wildcard, Game Week 8 or 9 really isn't worth it. If you're going to want a triple Spurs for those 2 game weeks, spend 10. I don't think I have any. I'd still like to have 1 or 2 Spurs players from Game Week 10 onwards, to be honest. Who would you captain, Son or Maddison against Luton? Right now, my preference is Son, but it is worth mentioning that Maddison's away record is even better. I wouldn't captain Watkins against Wolves, no. Same with Diaby. I think they're good options, but I wouldn't captain them. Adama Traore 2 when at Wolves, built like a brick. Yeah. I know the quote from Holding. He is at Fulham. Is he injured? Not seen him. I actually don't know the latest updates with him, but he has picked up a few injury problems in recent seasons. So let me just have a quick look. So the latest on Adama Traore is Adama is a muscle injury. He started to be involved in games, and we had a behind closed doors game during the international break, and he felt his hamstring. So he could be back for next week, but he's currently being assessed. But it's not looking too good at the moment. Bowen and Diaby or Wood-Prowse and Maddison. Really close one, mate, but I'd probably go for Bowen and Diaby. Thing is, though, going without Maddison against Luton could be, I want to say catastrophic, but it's hiding behind sofa time, really. Hi, Dylan. For this game week, is it better Julian or Darwin to bring in for Wildcard? On the Wildcard, I'd rather go for Darwin, but there's not much of a difference. I think they're both really good assets, and they are worth a punt. But considering fixtures, the suspension to Jota, and the injury to Gakpo, I'd go for Darwin. Areola or Edison next week? Areola. Maddison or Watkins? Maddison this week. Would you sell Saka or Rashford this week? I'd rather sell Rashford. I think Saka's a long-term hold. Already have Bruno. Yeah, I'd probably sell Rashford at the moment. Is my defence fine? Trent, Trippier, Gabriel, Doggy and Bayer. It is fine. Bayer's not great, but he's got some good long-term fixtures, to be fair to him. And you should see an improvement in Burnley, because they had one of the toughest starts to the season, facing a lot of the so-called top teams. So, yeah, you've got Trent, Trippier, Gabriel, the Doggy. They're 4 of the best defenders you can get. So, yeah, it is fine. I think Salah's a good captaincy option against Brighton, but I wouldn't go for him over Spurs players this week. Cash or double Spurs defence? I think in game week 8, it would be double Spurs defense. Long term, though, I would have Cash over 1 Spurs defender, if you catch my drift. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone for tuning in. We've been live for 1 hour and 38 minutes, which I do appreciate. I'm just going to answer a few more questions quickly. Dylan, who are you bringing in? Big Dan Burn for Botman. Did you know he is missing a finger as it got ripped off? I actually didn't know that, to be honest. That's quite mad, to be honest, to say the least. I've played my wildcard Twisted Parky, so I've made plenty of changes, not just Botman, and I just brought him in for a -4 hit. So a disastrous start to the season, but I am hoping for a bounce back, and I think Game Week 8 could be the time to start this little trajectory. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this stream to over 150 likes. And our aim is to get to 21,000 subscribers by the Tuesday deadline stream for UCL Fantasy. There's also going to be a team selection video tomorrow for Matchday 2 in the Champions League. And there's going to be the best wildcard team for FPL. And there's much more headed your way. Team selection for FPL, deadline stream next Saturday. More reaction streams to come. And there's also plenty already up on the channel, like the chip strategy guide for UCL Fantasy, the best limitless and wildcard team videos. They're all separate. So I do appreciate that. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon and channel memberships so you never miss a single team reveal, upload. You will get all of these videos with early access, sometimes up to a day early, sometimes even longer, and you also get featured on the front page of my YouTube channel. Thank you very much to those that have signed up already. Thank you, Hermoso. Thank you, Tuan. Please bench 1. It's a really difficult one to do off the top of my head, but Son should never be in this debate when he's facing Luton Town. You know that, of course. If I had to bench 1 player, it's probably Almiron. Yeah, I think he's the player to bench there. Thank you, Twister Parky. Kendrick says, would you consider getting any Liverpool players other than Salah? Yeah, Darwin Nunez up front, especially with Jota suspended and also with Gakpo being injured. Apart from him, Alisson's a decent goalkeeper, but I wouldn't go for him right now. Trent is always a good option, but ultimately, I think apart from Salah, it's either Darwin Nunez or Diaz in the midfield. Thank you, Twisted, as I said. And I appreciate the shout out. Is the double up on Salah and Darwin viable? Definitely, 100%, especially between Game Weeks 9 and 11 when Liverpool play Luton Town, Everton, and Nottingham Forest. Not in that order, but still. But yeah, I think it is definitely worth it. I've just answered your question, Aid. Hopefully you got that. I appreciate those that tuned in. If you've got any more questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll catch you very soon for more FPL and UCL fantasy content.